Your alternative talk radio contact. The Planet. KGRAradio.com.
With infinite complacency, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Welcome to another episode of Into the Fray, leering at you from the woodline. Visit the mothership at intothefrayradio.com. There you can find all the episodes, the blog posts, ITF gear, and sign up for the free guest newsletter. The weekly show is, of course, always free and available in all podcatchers, but if you'd like to support the show, and why wouldn't you, go to the website and click Become an Insider, which in turn gets you extra content each and every month. And by the way, if you would be so kind as to leave a rating and review in your listening platform of choice, Cosmic Karma shall be yours. Be part of the discussion by joining the interactive ITF Facebook group, follow on Twitter at ITF_radio, and Instagram. If you have an experience that you'd like to share, email Shannon at intothefrayradio.com. Thanks so much for listening. Now, if you would be so kind, buckle up your safety belts. Put that tray table in the upright position. Liftoff is upon us.
She was just saying Mini Robert will just have to wait, and he promises he won't curse you.
Okay. No, yeah, that's always a good thing. Hello, Mini Robert. Yes, I have to say hello to him, even though I cannot see him and he cannot see me.
I think he can see you. He's
just in case. Can see into my soul.
And then behind us we have our no sparkling vampire sign, so I touch my leg.
I was just talking to one of the chefs at work, and I know that he had a really late night, like the night before, and then I got there really early this morning. I'm like, dude, there's way too much done. Did you just not sleep? Are you a vampire? And he's like, I could be. And I was like, as long as you're not one of those damn sparkly ones, we're cool. I just said that. That is so funny.
Yep.
So hi. So we're, yes. And I've been enjoying you guys' little videos. I know that you're back on the road for Freaky Florida, book number 2. Congratulations.
Thank you. And other projects soon to be announced that we can't talk about just yet.
Oh, boy.
I have for you later in the week.
Oh.
Yeah, like just talking with people about things over the weekend. So
this is all suddenly something we thought we had months to prep might be a lot sooner. So.
Oh, well, congratulations. Whatever
Thanks.
it might be. It's all sounding like good things. So very cool. You guys deserve it.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, I mean, book 2 is much anticipated, of course. So I'm super excited to be going back to Florida with you guys. 2 of my most favorite people on the planet. You are definitely amongst them. And all I know is the next time I get out to Florida, I would like to try to meet up with you guys and hang out and maybe go somewhere or whatever, just to meet you guys finally.
Trying to figure out how to get out to Vegas too. So one of these days we'll get it all worked out.
it
One
is
or the other.
definitely on our travel.
Knowing
list.
our luck, it'll be the week we go out to Vegas. It'll be the week you come to Florida.
It could be. It could be. Usually the razor tends to fall that way, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, in case somehow, some way, people don't know who you guys are and why you're doing this. Why did you write Freaky Florida, which is, of course, the sequel to Eerie, Florida?
Well, for those that don't know us and haven't listened to our previous appearances, I'm Mark Muncy. This is Kari Schultz.
Yes.
And we did, I ran a haunted house for 20 years called Hellview Cemetery in St. Petersburg, Florida. We did it for charity, and we based it all on local urban legends and myths and monsters of Florida. It started with just Tampa Bay, and then we kind of expanded as we were running out of monsters. So I spent 20 years collecting monster stories and ghost stories. And from there, when the city shut us down for being too scary, we decided to write a wonderful book that collected all these stories. And we did that, and it was called 31 Tales of Hellview. And it was a spooky, kind of Stephen King versions of these legends. Well, then we had a lot of people asking us, well, what's the real legends? And that's when we decided to do Erie, Florida. So we traveled 3,000 miles now and have
so many miles
and have never left the state. One of these days we'll get out of here. And we visited all these crazy locations of all these amazing stories and all these haunted and creepy stuff. And so the first book, Erie, Florida, involved cryptids and ghosts and UFOs and just about anything you could possibly throw into it. We've had a few places that didn't quite fit that. There were some, of course, there's still monsters, there's still myths, there's still legends, but then there's a couple places that are just really unique, fun, crazy travel places that have spooky legends about them, but they didn't fit Erie, Florida, so that's where Freaky Florida comes in, and that's coming out in September 2018 from History Press.
Now, what about Hellview Cemetery? Are you guys working to get that back? Is that even a glimpse in the future that might come back?
It's on the kind of the back burner right now because we've been focusing so much on the books, but it is not dead. That which is not dead can never die, or something like that. I forget. We've got a few charity organizations that would like us to come back. That we're working with them to try to find a location, but real estate in the Tampa Bay area is insane right now. I think we're like one of the top places in the world to move, not just in U.S., but in the world.
Wow.
So everything is insane expensive right now for land. So nobody's wanting to lease, land for a haunted house. So, and, this area is a little different from most other areas where there's, the more rural places have lots of places to do that. This area is dominated by the theme parks for Halloween. Busch Gardens does Howl-O-Scream, and Universal does Horror Nights, and even Disney has Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween. So they kind of eat up all the competition around. So even when somebody does open an amazing independent attraction like Chamber of Terror or Field of Screams, they kind of get eaten up pretty quick. So it's one of those, maybe, we'll try, but it's, never say die, but not this year, maybe next.
Well, you guys are busy, so, and I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of Freaky Florida, and I know something that, I don't even know if I asked this the first time around, you guys cover such a gamut of subjects. I mean, how do you guys even settle on this stuff for each of the books?
We've had this discussion with other interviewers. It's kind of funny because it's one of those, we have modern journalism would like 3 sources. That's the classic. You want 3 verifiable sources to prove, a story. Of course, now in the 24-hour news cycle, somebody's like, oh, 2 people said it, it's good. And the old Weekly World News used to do 1. If I had 1 source, that was legit. That's how we got Bat Boy and some other great stories like that. So we were like, let's stick with 2. So as long as we had 2 verifiable sources of information on this legend, at least 2 witnesses or a newspaper article and a witness or something along those lines, those were the ones that kind of sifted to the top. And, and then also ones that we threw in a few that were famous, as in Erie, Florida. We talked about Robert the doll, of course, and the Gulf Breeze UFOs. Those are ones we kind of had to hit. And in Freaky, we got to hit a few more that are a little more unknown, but are still kind of big names. So it's a process. I won't say it's just something we can do easy. And also, it depends on if Kari's excited about drawing it or taking pictures of it.
Yes.
I do have certain preferences.
So in that case, you're like, we can drive there and take some photos. But so if you're not feeling it, you don't really feel like sitting down and actually illustrating that particular story.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't blame you. You got to feel the fire, right?
Yeah.
And I apologize for my voice. I have this smoky radio voice because I'm tapering off with this cold. So I apologize. I know I sound a little weird.
No, we were. It's okay. We were just worried about you. We're hoping you're okay.
Thank you. No, I'm good. I feel a lot better now. It's bad when you squeak like Mickey Mouse. Speaking of Disney and Mickey Mouse, one day I was squeaking when I went to talk, so I had to cancel an interview. And then the next day I'm like, I should maybe be okay. I don't know. So I could grumble something out, but then I completely lost my voice. So this is actually a huge improvement from that.
Oh, very good. Yeah. I got an interview. What was that for? Oh, it was for a In the Shadow of Red Eye, a Bigfoot hunting radio interview, and it was going to be for a YouTube show that this guy does, and Mike Familiant, and I got the call, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm totally good. And then that day I got so sick, and so that night when we did the radio interview or the video interview, I'm sitting there talking like this.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I was like, I'm Batman. But thankfully we had to redo it because it didn't save. So when we redid it, it was a couple days later, and my voice had this deep booming, the post cold voice, and that actually sounded pretty cool. So it worked out.
Do the old I'm Vincent Price or the I'm Batman thing. Yeah, that's how I'm kind of feeling. That's what I said online. I was like, I'm Large Marge from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Tell him Large Marge sent ya. I can easily execute that at the moment. I got to tell you, with the whole the video didn't save or the audio didn't save, that's happened to me once, and that's when you're just like, let's just find a cliff and jump off of it, because it just breaks your heart, especially if it was a really smooth, good interview and you had fun, and there's just certain moments you'll never get back.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we understand completely. Yeah, that was the first one was so the video looked great, but the audio was terrible. Yeah. And they couldn't save it. And then when they redid the second one, it was at like 2 a.m, and so I was like so out of it, but it still came out good. I was pretty happy. So
yeah, and you guys are troopers.
And we do what we can for hey, we got to spread the word about the books. Got to sell them books.
Yep.
You guys are a couple busy folks. Well, let's jump in here. Let's start off with traveling to Barden, Florida, the Barden Booger, and Dogman.
Well, Barden is this town about 45 minutes from Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. It is in literally the middle of nowhere, North Florida. It's off no beaten road that you would ever go on. You had to go to Barden, you have to be going to Barden. There's not, it is a 2-intersection town. In the middle of the town is Bud's Groceries, which is a hardware store / little convenience store looking thing. Mm-hmm. And Bud there is super nice, and he hosts the collection of all the articles on the infamous Barden Booger. Now, the Barden Booger is a skunk ape-like creature, or Sasquatch, that was sighted long ago and was noted for having a lantern, always carrying a lantern. So some sort of Florida wild man, was tall and had the aroma of the skunk ape, but he kind of disappeared into legend. And then, he appeared in the 1880s, disappeared into legend, and then came back in a big way in the 1960s. Somebody saw him, and then, stories started getting out, and then this newspaper picked it up in the early 70s and started really going to town on Barden Booger articles and just kind of, making a big thing. Now, Bud thankfully was able to kind of cash in on this and became the Barden Booger hunting headquarters. And people were coming there from all over the place, going out into the woods looking for this thing. And he gladly admitted to us at one point that he had a guy run out in a costume at one point just to drum up some, keep up the interest, which of course debunks a lot of it. I love that the sheriff just called him and said, "Whatever you're doing, stop it before somebody gets shot."
Uh-huh.
And, it didn't even go over to anything. Just, they all know each other. It's a small town.
Yeah.
It's like, I think population of like 50 to 100 people. But that doesn't explain all the sightings that predated that. Doesn't explain some of the sightings that have happened since. It's still not a major, thing, but it's one of those just great pieces of Florida lore. It's one of the reasons why we didn't put it in the first one was because it was kind of, it got debunked. But now it's kind of got a new twist. As your listeners are familiar with, the Dogman have been kind of rising in popularity, even taking over some of Sasquatch's old hunting grounds. Well, there have been recent sightings, not in Barden, but not too far from it. And a couple hunters have stumbled on them over various times. One guy so deadly serious about it that he's like going out, setting up hunting campground. He's ready to bag this thing. And that was kind of a crazy interview. The guy got scared to death. Giant creature comes up over his truck while he had stopped, apparently to relieve himself in the woods, and this thing comes up and basically claws out at his kill of a deer in the back of his truck, and just terrified this guy. And when we talked to him, he was shaking all over. It was still, and just bringing it back, it was like, oh my goodness. So Barden may get back on the map again for, cryptid headquarters again for Northeast Florida. I'm sure Bud's Grocery will be there to supply any dogman hunting equipment you might need too.
Yeah, that poor guy. You said in the book that he said it was a freaking werewolf from the movies. I mean,
yeah,
yikes.
That's exactly. I mean, he may not have said freaking.
Yeah,
but
you kept it PG though.
We're a PG-13 audience, so we only get those per book. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a case where it's okay to use the full F word. I'm just gonna say,
Yeah. He was like dead serious. He's like, it looked like something out of a movie. He didn't believe it for a few minutes, which is why he didn't shoot it or anything. He was like, I was dumbfounded. He freely admits, I was scared.
So you guys talked to him in person?
Yes. Well, I talked to him over the phone. So,
does he still go out?
It was a video chat. So
okay.
I could see he was
right.
Yeah, he was definitely shaking.
I mean, does he still go out and hunt and do his thing? Okay.
He goes out every weekend now to try to find this thing.
Oh, okay. So he's one of those. I can understand that, because some people, they see something like that, especially when you're talking about a dog man, because they're always pissy and they're very aggressive and they look like, I mean, if they wanted to, you're toast, you're done. Either they get obsessed with it like this guy and they keep going out, or they never go out in the bush again, period. So
he said that was his thing for about a month. He wouldn't go back.
Yeah.
And then he, said, I got to confront my fears. I got to find this thing. And I think it was something to do with, people were just kind of, razzing him about it, that he hadn't, caught anything or seen anything or done anything. So that's when he's like, you know what? You're right. I got to go find this thing. I got to prove that I'm not, crazy and that I'm not an idiot. And like I said, he's legit, so I certainly believe he believes. So.
Yeah, especially when you can see how they're reacting when they're retelling a story like that. You're going, that's really affected him. Something affected him, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely, like I said, it's one of those. I would love for somebody to come up with a concrete video proof of these things. Mm-hmm. But you know how it is. You're out there. I mean, we were out in the woods, and we were at a place that's not in Freaky, but we were just in a place last week. We were up in the Panhandle at this place called the Brooks Bridge, and this is a story we're going to premiere here because it's actually for something else. But we're going to surprise you with this one. There's a legend at this bridge that ghost wolves run along the path along Fort Walton Beach to this bridge, and every so often at midnight you can see them, or when it's a foggy night, or when it's low tide. We heard like a dozen different people telling this story different ways. So we went out there and we were just trying to take a picture of the bridge, and it's pitch black, it started raining, and you can't even get a picture of the bridge, even with a good flash from 100 feet away. So I can see where these guys out in the Ocala National Forest or Barden or any of those foresty places not being able to get a picture or something because shoot, you can get a picture of that, and that's well lit. So
yeah, I never harp on people for stuff like that. If they have a sighting or something, and even if it was a longer sighting, it's really tough to get a decent picture unless you have some kind of crazy DSLR camera and you happen to have the perfect film and lighting and you're quite close to it. So, yeah. So the ghost wolves, very cool. How many of them are there reported?
It's supposed to be a pack of about 20.
Whoa.
So they run in pairs to 3. And then they run across the water at one point, right up towards the middle of the bridge. Oh. Now, like I said, there's a bunch of different versions of this story, so it was one of those, we didn't have enough time to really work on it before Freaky came out, but we got up there, so that might be something for a future. We'll definitely post a video on YouTube for it.
Oh, very cool. Brooks Bridge, huh? The Ghost Wolves. Yep. I love that.
I thought you might enjoy that one.
There's just no shortage in Florida. I love Florida. So one day I will live in Florida. You'll see.
We'll get you there.
So before we move on, just really quickly, because something that stood out to me, and I started it, and I'm like, weird, is the fact that jumping back to the Sasquatch holding the lantern, was this part of the newer stories cultivated by Bud, or was that ever part of the older stories, this holding the lantern thing?
Holding the lantern kind of came from the old stories.
Wow.
Now, they did a Barden Booger Festival for a few years. And they had a couple up there that actually recorded a song called Barden Booger. And then they did a sequel. And then they even did a Christmas song. And the wife actually dressed up had a booger costume. It was a gorilla costume. And she would show up for these events and they would sing the song. And the gentleman who wrote the song and sang it, he passed away a few years ago, and she's getting up there too, but she still was driving around in the Barden Booger costume, and that's just crazy. But that lantern part is just such an integral part of the story that he's usually hanging out by the creek. He's usually just kind of minding his own business. He's not a aggressive skunk ape at all. And one story where he was standing beside the road, one of the oldest stories, is a lady got scared off her horse by him. But again, she said he just wandered off into the thick of the forest with a light, and she could see the light even after he disappeared.
That's interesting. Maybe it's a whole family of Sasquatch that just has less than 20/20 night vision, and they need lanterns.
They might. Who knows? These were. The Barden Booger was also known for stealing clothes. So that may have been something else tied in.
Yeah.
But somebody lost clothes. Oh, it must have been that booger.
Yeah, those damn boogers. And I have to say, what else says Christmas spirit like a booger? I mean, really, you need a Christmas song for it, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And he might be so popular, like how our gnome from Bach Tower made it on the Revere. We think Barden might show up on our cover somewhere.
Uh-oh. Oh, yeah. Need a little booger action. We all do. All right, well, let's go to Sanford, Florida, and the I-4 Dead Zone.
Now, this was a place first reported by the great late Charlie Carlson for his book, Weird Florida. Charlie grew up on this stretch of land, so that's why this is his home story, but it grew so much beyond him. He was actually one of the first guys we approached when we first started trying to work on Erie, Florida, about updating Weird Florida, and he was getting up there, and he was the one who just said, go ahead, I'm passing the torch, do what you want to do. So sadly he passed away shortly thereafter. But so the I-4 Dead Zone is when you leave Sanford and you're heading across Lake Mary, and there's this I-4 is this interstate that goes from Tampa to Daytona. It cuts the state right in half, basically, and it is the only major interstate that goes through the middle of the state. It has, of course, lots of accidents because the Tampa interchange is terrible. The Orlando area is terrible. The Daytona interchange with I-95 is terrible. The intersection with I-75 is terrible. So all these accidents occur, but they're not where most of the accidents occur. There is a quarter-mile stretch just past Sanford, just across Lake Mary, right before Casadega. There's a little quarter-mile stretch of interstate there that has more accidents on that quarter-mile interstate than the rest of I-4 combined. And it's crazy. So the story goes that there was a Dutch settlement or a German settlement, and it might have been Deutsch, because, that's how, they would have just said, oh, Deutsch means Dutch.
Yes.
No, but, and there are a lot of German immigrants in that area, so I'm thinking more likely it was German than Dutch, but there were Dutch immigrants in the area too. And Sanford and Lake Mary were doing really well. They were on one side of the water. On the other side of the water, they started this other settlement. And a couple families moved over there, and they just were having terrible luck. And then yellow fever hit, and as is common in Florida, because we got wonderful mosquitoes everywhere. And it wiped out this one family that lived on that area. And they were all buried and this one plot of land on their property, and the priest had already died, so they were buried without any last rites, according to the legend. Now, years pass, the land falls into Charlie Carlson's uncle's, hands, and they start developing the farm, and they find this little plot, the cemetery plot, and being nice people and religious people, they, fence it off and don't plow it over, don't do anything. They just treat it as though, somebody's family was here. The names had all worn off of it, so nobody knows the original, family name or anything. And he took care of it. Well, a couple times, he tried to fix the fence he put up around it at one point because it got knocked over. And the minute he did that, his tractor, almost killed him. There was all these, crazy coincidences anytime something would happen with that little stretch of property. He loaned the property to another farmer who wanted to plant that field one year when he couldn't take care of it himself. And that farmer decided he was going to plow over that area so he could plant more. And the minute he did that, that guy's tractor, malfunctioned. And then that guy's house burned down that night. So it's, crazy little coincidences, but a great, story. Well, they got eminent domain when they were building I-4, and the land got bought by the state. And Charlie's uncle told them, hey, there's a cemetery here. Be careful of it. Make sure you move the bodies, do whatever. And Charlie, who lived nearby, said he never saw them move the bodies. Never saw them do anything, and they started paving over it. They filled it with dirt, started paving over it. The minute they started, there was a hurricane coming across south of Florida called Hurricane Donna. And it became known as Deadly Donna, because most hurricanes, as you know, when they hit Florida, as soon as they hit land, they kind of slow down. They still do damage, especially the big ones, but they break up a little bit. They don't gain any more strength once they get out of the warm waters. This one made a right-hand turn and came straight up the state and went right over that portion of property that they had just started working and delayed construction by a month. And the storm got nastier and stronger, one of the rarest storms in Florida history for doing that, as it came across the state causing damage. It became known as Deadly Donna. And a lot of people attributed it to that stretch of land because that's where it bullseyed for. Crazy story. The minute they opened that property, once they finished building it after a while, the day they opened it, a semi-truck jackknifed on it within hours of it opening, right on that stretch of land. It's crazy how many coincidences. Now, a number of years later, this was not too long ago, actually, they decided to rebuild the on-ramp that goes over there. And the minute they started paving that, 2 hurricanes changed direction and went straight forward. Now, I was here for those. That was Charlie and I forget, it was like B and C suddenly turned and went, Bonnie and Charlie, I think, and went straight for it. And, so it's a crazy coincidence. Now, that made so much attention, though, the Weather Channel did a special on the I-4 dead zone. Now, you're making some big news when the Weather Channel does a special on your cursed stretch of highway.
No kidding. Here's my thinking, because, you're reading that they've got everything going over the graves and they're not sure who's there. If the movie Poltergeist has taught us anything, is you can't not move the bodies and then just do whatever the hell you want over them. Come on, guys.
Yeah, sadly, originally this was in the 60s when they first built that, so
yes. Yeah, it predated that nice lesson. Now, what about these mysterious lights? I mean, have you guys ever witnessed anything like that?
We haven't seen them, but that is the same. We were on the other side of that lake. That's where the picture from Erie, Florida is for when we were looking for Pinky, because that's the lake Pinky supposedly hangs out in too.
Yes, Pinky. If anyone needs to know about Pinky, just listen to the last edition of Erie, Florida, here on Into the Fray. We saved Pinky for last for that first round.
Yeah, because Pinky's awesome.
Yes, we love Pinky.
But that's that same lake. So there's a lot of other stuff that happened in that area, but a cursed lost settlements, and then a cursed family grave that. And people have seen, mysterious people on the side of the road or children running across the road. One person said it looked like an Amish boy ran out into the road. He wrecked his car trying to dodge it. A lot of those accidents involve people seeing strange lights or dodging shadows in the road or people in the road. So, there's something to it. You don't get that many accidents on that small of a stretch of road, especially when there's so many other more ripe areas to have terrible accidents on that stretch.
Florida's a busy place. And like you said, to have the Weather Channel pick it up and do something on it and call it the I-4 dead zone, that's pretty amazing. Do they have any stories of vanishing hitchhikers on there?
There are some legends of that, but most of that's down here with the Sunshine Skyway and places. But I believe there might be a few up there if I recall, but it's odd stuff. It is definitely a crazy area. And when you're driving that area, that's that area, like I said, you leave Sanford, which is, you've just left Orlando, you leave Winter Haven, you hit, Sanford, which is starting to get a little more rural, and then there's nothing until you hit, and then there's that secret exit for Casadega you almost miss, and then it picks up again when you get closer to Daytona. So that area that's kind of, there's some, a lot of oddball stuff right there.
Yeah, and Sunshine Skyway Bridge is covered in Erie, Florida, if anyone is interested in that story as well. All right, guys, let's jump to good old haunted Disney in Lake Buena Vista.
Oh, yes. Well, when you think about Florida, you think of beaches and you think of the mouse. Some modern people now also think about Harry Potter and Universal, but there's other stuff too. But the House of Mouse, we go into a lot of detail in the book on how Disney, purchased the property secretly and, did a lot of, kind of how his whole company, snuck around doing this, because it was a big surprise. He had done well at Disneyland, and he was trying to build his experimental prototype community of tomorrow. He wanted to build a city, a domed city with air-conditioned city and all these other future projects and all this stuff. A theme park was just kind of going to be part of it. He wanted to build the new New York, the new Manhattan, the world's greatest city. He was talking with companies to move there and move their corporate headquarters there. Everybody was going to ride around on monorails and, and what became the Wedway People Mover and some other stuff like that. And that was his original dream. Now, he died before any of that got even started. They had just started buying the land, and without him to guide it, it was pretty much destined to die. Mm-hmm. It's just a shame, because that could have been something really intriguing and something amazing. But it still turned into, an incredible legacy. and and the wonderful world of theme parks that we know and love. Now, the land there, though, has a dark history, as most land in Florida does, thanks to thousands of years of Indians, and then the Spanish slaughtering them, and then the other European settlers come in and start causing even more trouble for the poor Native Americans, and we had the three Seminole Wars because of this, and one of our good friends, Al Goingback, who's in the Seminole tribe of Florida, he had informed us that a lot of people didn't assumed the name Kissimmee, which is right next to Disney, was named for some Indian word that everyone had forgotten, because it was known as the Kissimmee River, and so a lot of Florida towns are named Tallahassee and Coosawhatchee and all this other stuff is all from Indian words. Lake Okeechobee, big water. So it's a lot of names come from that. So it was just assumed this was a word that people had forgotten. Well, Al and some other Seminole tribe people did some digging and found some terribleness behind that name. Apparently, when after the Second Seminole War, they were basically giving, and they were trying to relocate everybody to the reservations, past the Mississippi, and they were moving people out. A lot of tribes, didn't want to go. A lot of tribes were, going to be forced to live next to other tribes that they were at war with, and it was just easier to just try to hide and stay in the state, deep in the swamps and stuff. Well, as the lands are expanding and all that, and settlers are moving in, the settlers were basically given carte blanche to do whatever they wanted to the tribes, kill the men, do whatever you want to the women and children. It was just terrible. They're a dark spot of Florida history that we love to hide. But anyway, one Indian maid saw what had heard what had happened to a nearby town where they had raped all the women and killed all the men. Well, the Indian language, the Seminole language at that time, had no word for rape. And so when they came, the settlers came to drive them off their land, she tried to offer herself up to them. And having no word for rape, she was trying to use the English, which was kiss me. Mm. It's terrible.
Terrible story. Yeah. She was trying to distract them or appease them, or do we know the story behind what she was exactly trying to do?
It's an oral history passed down, and Al's still looking into it himself, but we have to include that in this because it's just it's
makes you look at Kissimmee, Florida, a little differently now, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it makes you sit there and go, "Oh, the happiest place on earth."
Not so much.
Maybe not. So, of course, Disney itself has some wonderful ghost stories. A lot of people are familiar with Disneyland out in California having the little boy that haunts the Haunted Mansion ride. And he's been known a long time. And what people didn't realize is also the Haunted Mansion here has a little boy ghost who seems to be fairly recent that likes to go on the ride. And he's seen, we had a couple witnesses who had those early day fast passes from the resorts, so they're like the first people in Disney and they want to be the first ones on the Haunted Mansion. So they get there and the guy greets them and says, "Hey, you're the first victim of the day," and oh great, and they get on, and then a few cars ahead of them they see the little boy and they're like, "Oh, the guy must have just not seen the little boy." Mm-hmm. As they as you make those couple turns and you can see a few cars ahead. And then at the end of the ride, they would get off, and then the guy would be like, "Oh, you are our first victim of the day." And they were like, "Wait, what about the little boy?" And the guy would go, "What little boy?" Mm-hmm. So that's becoming a bit of a thing where it's happening more and more often. Not, it's been reported a bit. There's another wonderful ghost at that dates back to even my time working for the Mouse. I worked there for a little while, but pretty much anybody who lives in Florida has to work for the Mouse at some point. I think it's legally required.
Right.
But there's a ghost at the Pirates of the Caribbean that is Frank, one of the construction workers who died there. And every morning they have to say hi to him on the PA system. They say, "Good morning. Good morning, Frank." And then every night, at the end of the night, "Good night, Frank." If they do not, bad things happen on the ride that day. And he has been known to break the ride down quite a bit. They have a door right next to the famous where the dog's holding the keys. And they call that Frank's door. So whenever something's wrong, if that door is open, that's usually a sign that Frank has been out and about trying to mess with things. He really doesn't like the Johnny Depp animatrons, apparently, so he likes those.
I love that part. That was my favorite part of that story, is the fact that he's not a big fan of Johnny Depp.
Nope. And apparently we're curious to see how he's going to like. They're changing the redhead part to make it a little less misogynistic, and they're making the redhead kind of a badass pirate.
Oh.
So we're curious to see, because he doesn't like changes much. So we'll see what happens. But that area has been under construction for a little bit, so no one's seen him for a little while, but that's supposed to reopen soon, so we will see.
So what about and I was wondering if this is, I'm assuming it is a verified story, because, I mean, things happen at rides and parks and, just people and things happen. People die. Yes. So this young woman, there was a boat that actually slipped the tracks at the end of the drop, at the end of the ride. So that's a verified story. And then people do actually see her standing over the water near the big pirate ship, but she's soaking wet, which is really horrible. But that's a verified story, huh?
We've had a few people talk about it. So we've heard a few witnesses. Now, Disney is, they have, Disney is not in Kissimmee. Disney is not in Orlando. Disney is in Lake Buena Vista and Reedy Creek, Florida. They own those cities. Oh. You'll see Reedy Creek Development Company. When you drive on Disney property, you'll see the Reedy Creek Fire Station. Disney made all kinds of special deals with the state. Walt did all this before he died to make sure he would have free reign, to not have to worry about code regulations, and not have to worry about other things. Now, he did this. He made deals where he would buy tons of extra land that would go untouched and preserved, so that every acre he used, he could, justify. And by doing this, they have a lot of secrets, a lot of secret little hidden, the tunnels you always hear about underneath Disney World, so people can get in and out and never be seen. So employees, you don't have to see them walking around too much. There's a lot of little hidden things there. And that's one of the things that everybody's like, oh, no one ever dies on Disney property. That's not true. They if somebody's dead on the scene, they pronounce them dead on the scene. But they do run the hospitals. They run the ambulances that go on there. They are in charge of all emergency services. And so they have a little leeway in hiding some things. Now, there have been lawsuits about people who've died on rides and stuff like that. So, there were a couple deaths reported on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, over the years. So who knows if it's particular or not, because usually the details are pretty cloudy on those reports.
Well, you have to figure the number of older folks on these rides, the odds of someone having a heart attack or something happening to them and them dying, it's something that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, there are people who've died on various rides. So every ride has its own ghost story, but those are the ones that are some of the biggest. And of course, the Tower of Terror at MGM is, which is being reshaped to Guardians of the Galaxy.
I hadn't heard that yet.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And they had a bellhop who worked there died on duty. Apparently, he got hurt by a machine. And he's been seen there now a lot in the dark part of the ride before you do the big drop. And employees say they see him at the end of the night when they're doing their last night run. and he'll cause some mechanical failures and electronic failure, which is kind of funny because that's kind of the point of the ride.
It
So
is.
they're like,
Yeah.
some people have seen him and didn't report it because they just assumed he was some part of the ride.
Right.
So, and then when they'd say, "Oh, that was a new part. I don't remember that," they'd be like, the employees are like, "Oh yeah, it's a new part."
You're like, totally normal. Nothing to see here. Yep. Goodbye. Have a nice night.
So it'll be curious to see if he sticks around after the remodel to Guardians of the Galaxy. So.
Yeah, just like Kari, I had not heard that they were doing a remodel for that. So it'll be the same type of a ride, but they're just gonna have it tailored towards that.
Galaxy Breakout. So you're in a prison and you're escaping with them, and you'll see a lot of video interactions with the characters and stuff. I guess California one's already open.
Oh.
So
wow.
But MGM down here is going to be changing to that soon.
Is what's his name? Chris? Help me out. What's his last name?
Chris Pratt. Yeah.
Pratt. Yeah. Is he going to be there in person? Because that would be nice.
They have a meet and greet there with a guy who looks just like him, and it's great because you get to also meet Groot. They have a little mini baby Groot.
No. Not as cool as Mini Robert. Let's just throw that out there and get brownie points with Robert.
Yeah, Mini Robert's he's like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
It's exciting. Yeah, we'll see what happens. So,
if you guys could come back and haunt I'm only going to give you two choices: either the Haunted Mansion, which might be a little cliche, but I mean that's a classic, and I love that ride, or Pirates of the Caribbean. Which one would you go for?
I'd totally go for Haunted Mansion. That's my favorite ride. I've been on that so many times. Just the effects on that are incredible. I think I'd have a really good time.
I like the story behind Haunted Mansion where they, because that was Walt was originally wanting it scary.
Yeah.
And, to be really scary. And then one of the other Imagineers wanted it to be kind of goofy. And then Walt was going to be the deciding decision. Well, Walt died before he decided which one was going to go. And so that's why it goes all over the place, from comedy to haunt, to full scary, back to comedy. And I think that's why that ride is so popular, because nobody really knows how to take it. And if I was going to haunt one, I would say, I would probably haunt Haunted Mansion just for fun. But to be fair, if I was going to haunt a ride, I would haunt Winnie the Pooh. Because it's such a weird ride, and I would be like, bring back Mr. Toad.
Oh my God, that's amazing. That's a fantastic answer. I love that. I was not expecting it. Well done. Oh my gosh. Yeah, where's the honey, Pooh? And where's your shorts, buddy? Goodness, I mean, airing stuff out. All right, so St. Petersburg, the oldest resident. Let's talk about this one. I love this story. It was I wasn't sure what the oldest resident was going to be. It could be a number of things. So this is a cool one.
That's what we tried to do with a lot of the titles in this. I thought they'd intrigue. So the oldest resident of St. Petersburg. Now, St. Petersburg is known used to be known as the retirement capital of the world. It was, they had green benches everywhere for people to just sit and watch the world go by. And it was the quiet little town next to Tampa, which was the big booming town. Well, years have changed. St. Pete is, now the rural, the suburban neighbor of Tampa. It's just as big. Millions of people live here. It's got an amazing art community. It's booming. There's restaurants for miles. It's just fantastic. That's why we live here. It's one of our favorite cities. Now, and it has some great museums. The wonderful St. Petersburg Museum of History is where we do most of our archives work with the lovely Marta Jones, chief archivist there. She helped us with most of our archive photographs for all of our books. She's done that. She was an old part of the part of Hellview. She helped out with the haunted house a few years. Played our Morrigan witch, and then was even one of our circus ladies. Well, so in this museum, they have a lot of crazy stuff. They have a rotating main exhibit that's usually some sort of Florida history, but it was like Florida during World War II. They recently did La Florida, which was all about the Spanish exploration of the state. They have one wing that is a permanent display of the Benoit 14 plane, which was the first professional air flight ever. And it was across Tampa Bay where they delivered mail and a few other things. So it was the first, commercial airlines were born here in St. Petersburg. So they have a big, replica of that in there. And then they have their oddities. They have a lot of because people die down here, lots of people retire down here and donate stuff to the museum. And so they have a two-headed calf. They have a two-headed chicken. They have a bunch of just random weird stuff that you would never expect, a history museum to have. They actually have a two-headed cow festival every year now because of that cow. But
that's awesome. It's so random. That's why it's amazing.
It's so great. Yeah, we love this little museum. It's fantastic. It's kind of off the beaten path, but the most, their big exhibit. A lot of people know their two-headed calf, but their big exhibit. They in the early 1900s, they were on the big pier. We were known for our $1 million pier. Then it became this big inverted pyramid pier. That's all been torn down. They're trying to decide what to do with the pier, the St. Pete Pier. So right now it's, there's a big legal battle on what it's going to be. It's going to be some sort of tourist destination downtown. But anyway, the museum's always been right there on that same pier, just down at the base of it. Well, that pier was an actual functioning pier for people to, stock their boats in. Well, as we discussed before in previous books, and some of you who watch American Horror Story might know, Florida was big for circuses. Ringling wintered down here, and it still has, the Ringling Museum down there. Their last show was actually here before they closed up. But Gibsonton was the famous freak show town that's just across Tampa Bay from us. A lot of circuses wintered down here, hoping to get Ringling's, cast-offs or something that they passed that they could turn into a headline or something. So a lot of circus performers flooded here, also trying to find work. So we became kind of a circus mecca. Well, one boat with a circus on it, a traveling carnival, got on the pier and got stuck there for a little bit and couldn't pay their bill to leave. So the captain was like, well, I got to leave. We got to get out of here. They decided to part with one of their exhibits for their carnival to the city of St. Pete to pay their bill. Now, this unique exhibit got donated to the city, got kept away from prying eyes for a while because it was so unique, until it finally, the city gave it to the History Museum. The History Museum didn't know what to do with it for a little bit, but then figured out, hey, this is something unique. We have to do something with it. So they started displaying it. It is a mummy and a sarcophagus. Now, I think you can count on two hands the number of mummies outside of Europe and Egypt that are actually in permanent display in the United States. And St. Petersburg has one. That is our oldest resident. She is thousands of years old. She is this lovely lady who was actually on display in a Victorian casket that the circus had kept her in, not in the sarcophagus. They had the sarcophagus next to her. The problem being, nobody knows who she is. Nobody knows where she came from. They know she's Egyptian. They kind of have some ideas. They did some, the Smithsonian did some work on her to figure out who she is, what she is. She has a scarab over her heart that they found with an MRI that they gave her. They x-rayed her. And just fascinating stuff. The museum has all the x-rays and the MRI footage and all that. It's very, very crazy. She is still on display in a revamped Victoria of her own original Victorian coffin because they're afraid of honestly getting her out of it. They actually had Smithsonian help them restore it.
Wow.
So that she wouldn't get hurt. They're afraid to do anything else with it. Now her sarcophagus is not hers. it's years younger than her, thousands of years younger than her. So obviously it was something else that was tomb robbed and, just put with her because, hey, you got a mummy, let's have a sarcophagus. So, as people raided tombs over there, and sold them to, things like this, a traveling circus. That's so it's unlikely we will ever know exactly who she was. But there's some theories. We post a couple of them in the book. So read the book and find out. And maybe you can help solve a mystery that's thousands of years old.
Can you imagine her journey over all of that time?
It's incredible. And the fact that when you see her, she's still, not, I wouldn't say, she's definitely not on my bottom list, but,
yeah,
it's definitely,
yeah,
she's adorable. And, and it's, but they recently made a huge display for her as part of a Travel Channel. Travel Channel's done a couple of mysteries of the museum with our wonderful St. Pete History Museum because they have such unique exhibits. And they were doing a spin-off show called Museum Men, where they were talking about this company that builds museum exhibits, fancy museum exhibits. And they rebuilt the mummy exhibit for her. Because before she was just in this little air-conditioned, display case, and then they rebuilt the whole thing for her, and now they've got a replica Tutankhamun crypt and all that there. So it's a whole life after death exhibit, and it's beautiful. So we highly recommend you go visit her. The museum staff call her Marie after a previous caretaker of the museum started calling her Marie. So. They're not. They may have a ghost in their museum, and they sometimes say it's Marie's friend.
Oh.
So that's that's just part of the fun.
So Marie's friend being just some other random ghost, or is this something tied to this previous employee?
It seems to be upset whenever something happens with Marie.
Oh, interesting.
Somebody did some work when they were restoring the cabinet. It went a little crazy when they were. When they moved Marie out for X-rays and the MRI, that didn't go over well. So it's definitely some sort of, at least has some sort of guardianship with Marie. So
maybe that'll be in the third book then, huh? A little bit more information on Marie and when she gets a little upset in the museum.
Yeah, we might find something on that. It might make it in. So.
All right. Well, for our last story. For this first edition of Freaky Florida, we're going to go pretty dark here on this one, and that is the Devil's Tree in Port St. Lucie. And I've been in Port St. Lucie, but it was prior to me knowing there was this Devil's Tree, or I would have gone there. But let's talk a little bit about this.
Okay, Port St. Lucie is a kind of a sleepy suburban, it's now filled with housing developments and all that over the last few years because most of Florida is quickly filling with that, except for that nice dark area in the middle. We'll talk about that in a future story.
Yes.
But this area was pretty rural. It's a little north of Miami, and kind of in as you went there, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but not so much anymore. It's developing. There was a terrible person who lived there. Some of you may know, if you are familiar with the wonderful world of serial killers, a man named Gerard John Schaefer. He was a sheriff's deputy down in Miami, and he was known for picking up hitchhikers, flashing his badge, picking them up, usually in pairs, and then he would take them somewhere, and he would chain them up, and then he would do terrible, terrible things to them. And then he would kill them. And then he would continue to do terrible, terrible things to them with their bodies and their remains. Mm-hmm. Until he finally got tired and moved on to new victim. Now, he was getting away with this for a long time. And eventually moved out of Miami up to Port St. Lucie, where he had a house in the middle of nowhere on the end of this dirt road. And is near the Channel 4 canal or Channel 24. I'm going to have to look up my notes there. But it's a canal middle of nowhere. There was no houses there or anything. And there was a big oak trail there, and his house was there. And he, again, captured a couple girls, took them to the tree there out there behind his house, chained them up, did terrible things to them, killed them, and continued doing terrible things to them. Now, shortly after this, he moves again, this time a little further north, gets another job with another sheriff, and within a few days on the job, he captures a couple more girls. And this time, though, he gets a call after he's chained them up and told them he's going to do these terrible things to them. He gets a call, has to go out on an assignment. So he has to leave right then. He's still new with this new sheriff, and he doesn't want, to make a bad impression. So he leaves them, saying, I'll be back. They escape, and they go to the nearest sheriff station, which happens to be his sheriff station. But thankfully, he wasn't there. He immediately, when he gets back to the tree and sees they've escaped, he calls his sheriff and says, Sheriff, I did a stupid thing. And he makes up this elaborate story about kidnapping these girls to scare them. I just wanted to put a scare into them. And told him I was going to sell them into prostitution and slavery and all this. And then I was going to kill them. But I was just trying to scare them, but they got away. And so the sheriff, doesn't buy it, at least, in the least, has him arrested on assault and false imprisonment. And he goes to jail. Now, while he's in jail for this, they start piecing things together about his past. And they start figuring out some of these old cases that seem very similar. So they start looking into him a little more. And it's about this time at his old abandoned house where the Devil's Tree is, they find an old homeless guy is out, collecting recycling cans out in the woods. He's following the trail. He finds the old abandoned house. And out behind the abandoned house, he finds the bodies, what's left of them, the remains. And that's when he calls the police. The police go out to investigate that down in Port St. Lucie. Now, Schaefer gets out on bail up where he was at because, he's a sheriff's deputy. He had some money. He got out on bail. While he's awaiting trial on this other charge. And he's saying he's not guilty, that the only reason he's being framed for all this is just, it's bogus. Well, so while he's out on bail, there's possibility that he killed again because they found a couple more victims years later. But anyway, the terribleness, they found that body, the two girls down in Port St. Lucie. And so they start looking into, well, who owned this property? Oh, Gerard John Schaefer. So they go to investigate his current residence. There they find his box of trophies. Teeth from one of the dead girls from Port St. Lucie. Trinkets from other people, and just all this terrible, terrible things. And this was in his mother's house. It's just that he was.
God.
Yeah. It's, oh my God, it's horrifying. Sorry. That was one of the darkest things reading about and researching.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So
he gives no F's. I mean, that's just a very sick person.
He is the classic serial killer. Trophies, just being terrible. And to the bodies, and and making them make decisions to who dies first and stuff like that. It is classic stuff. So anyway, they pieced together that he definitely killed these two girls. So now he's on trial for murder. He still's proclaiming innocence. He says, "Oh, the only reason, they're framing me. They want somebody to do this." Well, he gets convicted because it's pretty overwhelming evidence. He goes to jail just for the death of those two girls down in Port St. Lucie. They start digging further and are finding all these other cases that he has ties to. and probably did. And the number is staggering. It's like 80 victims that they know of. Well, they're piecing that together. While they're piecing that together, he, cocky SOB that he is, starts writing books with a partner, and he famously writes these books of written by a serial killer in prison.
Oh.
He is basically confessing, but fictionally confessing to all these crimes. So he's like, oh, this is how I could have done it. This is how I would have done it. So he's basically bearing his soul without actually, confessing to these crimes.
Right.
He's very smart about it. He also starts a correspondence with Ted Bundy, who was also captured at the time. And they kind of form this rivalry in their stories. Like, how many did you kill? How many did you kill?
Oh, God.
I killed this one that was pregnant. Does that count as 2?
Oh.
Yeah, that's the kind of sick crap that they're talking about.
Yeah.
And anyway, long story short, he gets murdered in prison before they can try him for any other of these crimes. So, but, couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. But now let's get back to the tree. So, told all the terribleness. Now we can talk about something a little weird. This is why it's eerie Florida and freaky Florida. Schaefer's house is destroyed. There's a little bit of, you can still see the foundation of it when you go out there. The land, they can't do anything with it. They don't know what to do with it. It gets turned into a state park. It becomes Oak Hammock Trail Park. St. Lucie. It's right on this canal. It becomes a boat ramp for the canal. It's a beautiful little park. And people are flocking to it because people want to see the tree. Now, the tree has already got a legend because it's got 2 girls killed there. Well, the legend goes back that it was a hanging tree, and that's why Schaefer was drawn to it. The tree was created by Satan himself, and that's why it's so dark and scary when you go there. And so there's all these crazy things. Now, there's this hole in the side of the tree, and the hole drips this black sap. And so the legend was is if you collected the black sap and made a candle out of it, you could create more powerful spells and incantations if you were into dark magic. And so people would scrape this black stuff, and people would go out there to visit the park, and it would be chased away by robed cultists. It was crazy. The stories are insane about this tree. So the city and the state are finally, we got to get rid of this tree. This is terrible. So they hire 2 guys to go chop down the tree. And these 2 guys go out with their chainsaw, and and the minute they start cutting the tree and it gets some bark, the chainsaw breaks. So they go get, and the chain snaps. So they go get their backup chainsaw. And the minute it hits the tree, it breaks. So they take their chainsaws, get them in their truck, and they go buy new chainsaws. On the way out of there, they get in a horrific car accident, and both of them are killed. This is where the curse of the tree legend begins. So the story continues where they had a piece of bark from the trees, stuck in their car, so it killed them. So then it became, if you take a piece of the bark of the tree and put it in somebody you don't like's car, they'll get in a car accident and die, or something terrible will happen to them. So that story grows because some lady goes to the tree to get a piece of bark to go put it in her cheating husband's car, and then she gets in a car accident as she's leaving because it's still in her car. And almost dies. And so that story actually got in the paper.
Well, interesting.
So the legend grows even further. And so they don't know what to do about this. Finally, the state's like, look, we can't get rid of the tree. It keeps defying any attempts to kill it. So they fill in the hole with cement, hoping that may eventually kill the tree. Nope, the tree's just growing around it. And, it's still there. If you go to Oak Hammock Park, don't take the first path, although you can wander around and wind up back where it's at. But if you take the second lesser path in, believe me, you can't miss it. There's a giant, creepy tree, and then also at the base of the tree, if you go just a little bit further out, you can still find the remains of Gerard John Schaefer's old house.
Oh.
And walls of stones there.
Did the city rip his house down because of what he was keeping there, or?
That's a vague part of the story. We don't really know. Apparently the house was damaged before he moved, and then it just was left to rot in the state, it just kind of collapsed in on itself. And then, because this was years later when they figured everything out. So that area was just pretty much abandoned. And now to get back to Oakhammer Park, you have to drive past this beautiful urban housing development. You have to drive through these twisting roads, through these beautiful homes, and then you get out to Oak Hammock Trail, and it's beautiful. But if you take that second turn, and when we were there, the park ranger there is just like, look, we love people coming to visit the tree. Don't do rituals there. Mm-hmm. Because when we got there was candle wax on the roots where people had been, doing whatever. He's like, I don't mind people doing spells there, but don't use candles because you're going to burn the forest down.
Right.
And, and it's a natural preserve for box turtles and a lot of special animals out there.
And we saw the turtle on the way out.
Yeah, on our way out, we had this one beautiful box turtle popped his head out for Kari.
I said, hi, Kari.
And,
I love all the wildlife out there. That's why I would be like the park ranger. Like, hey, you want to come out of the tree? Fine. Just don't burn the whole damn place down, please.
And don't try to take any bark from it because, hey, it's an old tree. It's growing. Let it grow. Let it do its thing. Let it live its life. It's hundreds of years old. It's going to keep going. Stop cutting the bark out of it. It's just going to hurt it.
It's honestly a really impressive tree. Like, its limbs are really wide and tall. Like, you can't get that whole tree into a picture. It's not just some tree. Like, this is a tree.
Now, when we went we tried to record video there, and we had some issues like we did at the Wikidemus site, where the video came out a little choppy.
Oh, interesting.
And then I tried to do a couple panorama photos to try to get the whole tree. Every one of them has a glitch in it. Yeah, we didn't know at the time. We didn't know till later.
Because you guys posted a little video on your Instagram of the Devil's Tree, didn't you?
That was our third take.
Wow. Because of the problems you were having. Yep. Very interesting.
And even in that one, the sound kind of stutters out at the end and makes some weird noise. Yeah.
I did notice that. Very interesting. I'm kind of, you picture something like out of Avatar. You know how the trees grow in Avatar all gnarled and very large, and you imagine the roots going just miles and miles down, even though they don't, but that's what they look like they do. That's what I would picture the Devil's Tree as at this point. After pouring cement in it and all this other stuff they tried to do to disband its roots, it never worked.
Never worked. I mean, they tried, the only thing they didn't try was poisoning it, and that's because it's a nature preserve, and that was kind of against the grain. But, they're like, at some point, they may do something, but honestly, now it's just a nature preserve. And the legend kind of has died off a little bit. I'm afraid we're going to kind of stir it up a little bit with this, but hey, it's there, and if more people visit the park, that's good for the park.
Exactly.
So it's a beautiful place. They got a nice little picnic facility, clean bathrooms, and of course there are legends that you can hear the girls screaming and ghostly appearances, and even in the bathrooms supposedly is where that you can hear them. But be careful of robed figures, because we have, like I said, there was candle wax there when we went. It was pretty crazy, and it's tough getting candle wax off of roots. So be kind for your rangers.
Yeah, and see
places you go.
What was that, Kari?
Oh, I was just saying, just have respect for the places you go to.
Absolutely. And you know what? You guys are probably can easily be a huge advocate for that, because of all the places that you've been, 3,000 plus miles traveled, and I'm sure more to come with what may come with your new projects. I don't know yet. We will all know soon. But I mean, if you're going to go out somewhere, just be respectful. Be a nice human, please.
Yeah, exactly. What is it? The take only pictures, leave only footprints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when you guys were at the tree, though, and I know there's like candle wax and the story behind it and everything, but I mean, before you started taking the video and you're kind of going, something's really weird here, did you get weird vibes? I mean, was there anything prior to that you noticed?
I did. Kari still is kind of oblivious to most of this stuff, but I was definitely, the hairs on the back of my neck were on end. And like I said, the last couple places like that, Dozier, Robert, down visiting Robert and Martello Museum in Key West, and then Wikidemus. Those are the three. And we went back to Wikidemus recently.
Yes, we had to go back
because we saw the developments that were going on around it. It's still not been developed, but they've built up right near where it was.
I don't. I hope they don't go all the way.
Yeah. I really do too. Yeah, I had to make sure it was still okay because it was fun.
Yeah, we were up there for another potential site, and just like we got to swing by the grave just to see if it's still there, and it was still there. The trail's still there. It's still creepy as ever.
Do you guys think it's gonna go one of these days?
I'm pretty sure the city is about the eminent domain.
How much Florida gets developed, so much just gets taken up by these cookie cutter houses.
And there's so much all around it. Like I said, now it's all built up all around it. And unless Eggins Creek Greenway expands back to that, which I don't see happening, the city will probably do something with it because it's right up next to the high school. And there's houses literally now maybe 100 yards from it on both sides.
No.
Maybe like a half mile to each side. Now it's a lot less. And it's still a beautiful live oak forest. The trail's still there. It's still creepy as heck. And
we always have a good experience.
We always have good experiences there. It's beautiful. Yeah. I love it.
Wikidemus also heard in the first few, I don't know exactly which edition that was, but in the Erie, Florida editions of Into the Fray is Wikidemus, so everybody can check that out too. Well, guys, what about pre-orders? I mean, I know the book is officially coming out in September, but are there pre-orders going to be available for Freaky Florida?
It is up on Amazon already.
Nice.
The cover has not popped up yet, but should soon.
Very soon.
I would assume soon. The publisher's pretty much finalizing it.
Yeah, I think
Kari did a heck of a job. She made it look like an old 1940s Florida postcard.
Yes.
And I think we sent that to you a little bit, so you might be able to do something with that, Shannon, if you want to mirror it on your page.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Yeah, no problem. We sent you some pictures for some of these stories, too. So feel free to use those. That's we'll have, of course, our friendly local bookstore where we're actually recording this, Books at Park Place down in St. Petersburg. They will, about a month out, we'll start sometime in August. We will start the eBay pre-sale that we did for Freaky, where we did for Erie. Yeah, I'm sorry. We'll be redoing it for Freaky, where our wonderful and talented illustrator Kari Schultz will, for a nominal extra charge, draw a wonderful little drawing inside your copy of Freaky Florida, a personal thing for you. And that'll go up probably about a month before launch. So we'll be on again before then to give you some details.
Yes, you will. Yeah, edition 2 for Freaky Florida will be soon. All right, well, let's plug the website and, of course, all of your social media outlets.
Okay, well, of course, ErieFlorida.com is where you can find all about Erie, and that will also include Freaky Florida and some other stuff. You can find us at Erie Florida on Facebook, or you can also find us at Freaky Florida on Facebook. I think it's actually Freaky Florida Book, because there's also another Freaky Florida.
Yeah,
some news channel used it back in the 70s.
Oh, I gotcha.
So it's or in the 80s, so it's still kind of taken some places. But if you go there, you can find it. Also, we're on Twitter a lot and Instagram. YouTube is where you can find the full-length videos. Instagram, we do like little teasers for our YouTube videos and some photos while we're out and about on all these crazy adventures. And we may have more to announce soon. We're talking like Thursday soon, which for this airs.
Yes.
So we might have more information. But it's all up in the air right now, so it's nothing we can really say concrete. But we will, of course, Shannon, you are first on our list to let know. So.
Well, thank you guys so much. If there needs to be any addendum, I can announce it, or we can hop back on for a few minutes, and you guys can add the addendum yourself to this announcement. So I don't know what it is, but congratulations. It sounds like you guys are excited.
Teaser, guys, teaser.
Yes.
So, Minnie Roberts says hi, and he's got his little mini lion. And
next time. Yeah.
If you get down to Key West and you get to the Forties Martella Museum, they used to have little almost beanie Roberts that were awfully cute. Now they get 1,000 a year of these super awesome mini Roberts that look amazing.
They are really well detailed.
And he has been our booth babe for a few cons now, and boy, did the kids love him. When the kids,
oh man, so many kids know who he is. Like,
really?
Like, that's Robert, and their parents are like, who?
No kidding. These kids are up on it, man. I love it.
Yep, excited, but yeah. Oh, and we're watching the bats come out outside the store right now over the little swamp that's out in front of our store.
See, now how fitting is that? Thank you to the bats. I love Florida. Over the swamp, too. Amen.
Yeah, beautiful highway right behind it, a big shopping center we're in, and a little swamp right in the middle, and bats and alligators.
I was going to say, with a few gators up in there. Yeah, that's right.
And then some egrets and herons. And, every once in a while. So, well, Shannon, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you always. Thank you for your time. You guys are one of the most oft-visited guests on ITF. And, of course, two of my favorite people. I love you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. You guys have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little biography. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. and then there is spring. When you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on, you are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. A master will say to somebody, "Now get up and walk across the room." And he comes back and he says, "Where are your footprints?" They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.